just a quick disclaimer before we get into the video. Digimon. They are complex yet charming monsters that come in all shapes and sizes, full of possibility and capable of evolving into nearly anything. Oh, and also once you get too old, yours will die and there is nothing that you can do about it. At least, that's what Digimon Adventure Last Evolution Kizuna's narrative tells us. But before we get to that, let's take a step back and look at the franchise as a whole. Digimon is a series that holds a lot of variety, similar to the monsters that inhabit it. Each anime series takes a different approach to the world of Digimon, establishing their own mechanics and rules. In the world of Digimon Tamers, the Tamers must use various cards to enhance and evolve their Digimon partners. In the Cross Wars universe, Taiki and a select few are able to cross their Digimon together to produce stronger results. While the mechanics change, there is a set consistency to each take on the Digimon world. Certain factors are always the same, such as which factions inhabit the world, these being groups such as the Royal Knights or the 7 Great Demon Lords. With the adherence to these defining factors, each entry is able to simultaneously feel familiar while exciting and unique. The themes and concepts covered in all the different Digimon series are typically inspiring and positive, showcasing stories of conquering your fears, accepting destiny, and fighting for what you believe is right, and being able to change for the better despite past mistakes. These encouraging themes help to define Digimon as a fun and uplifting series. All of these traits have been ingrained in the franchise's DNA, going as far back as the first entry in the Digimon anime catalog, Digimon Adventure. Jumping onto the scene in 1999, Digimon Adventure was released to high amounts of praise. Its unique setting and concepts gave a draw to both young and old audiences. In the United States, it received similar praise as well, despite the numerous changes done to the original script. Rising from this success, Digimon Adventure spawned a direct sequel series simply titled Digimon Adventure 02. From here, the series continued to grow in various directions: video games, manga, animated films, and more anime all branched off and gave Digimon its own unique identity. Nearly 20 years out, and a new film releases with the intention of closing the book on the Digimon adventure. Taichi, Yamato, and the other chosen children are all entering their adult lives and are confronted with the tough challenges that follow. Determining what path they're going to follow, Taichi and Yamato both find themselves at a standstill. While the others are moving along smoothly, these two can't seem to find their place in the world. Putting their adulthood progress on the back burner is the arrival of a new threat to both the digital and real world: Aosmon. The two aimless adults assemble the gang and try to uncover the mystery of this imposing foe. For a story that aims to showcase the transitional period from youth to adulthood, Digimon Adventure Last Evolution Kizuna, or just Kizuna or Last Evolution, sets the framework nicely. On the outset, Kizuna appears to be a love letter to adventure while closing the book on these characters' story. However, what the final product turns out to be is much more complicated than that. For every success, there is failure. Taking what could have been a beautiful send-off to a 2-decade-old series and turning it into misery porn and leaving me as well as others wondering what went wrong. Settle in and get ready to take a look at Last Evolution with me as we go over what went right and what went very wrong. Now, for the sake of being fair, I want to first go over everything that Last Evolution did right. When it comes to analyzing media of any kind, it's best to acknowledge the positive and the negative. Despite my many issues with it, Last Evolution did have some excellent aspects to it. For starters, the animation was simply marvelous. The introduction scene featuring the battle against Parrotmon set the stage perfectly, with the evolution sequences calling back to the original series. The only time that the animation stuttered a bit was when Yamato became CGI briefly, but aside from that, it was consistent and lovely to watch. The characterization of the cast was done wonderfully as well, aside from a few decisions that we'll get to later. Yamato and Taichi both act in line with their previous iterations. In their older years, time has escaped them, leaving them aimless, but with that same readiness to accept the call to action. Last Evolution pays homage to previous Digimon films, which is doubly nice considering the previous adventure series, Tri, hardly acknowledged the series that came before it in any meaningful way. The intro fight between the Chosen Children, or Digidestined for the Dub Gang, and Parrotmon mirrors the fight from the first adventure film. When the first showdown with Eosmon occurs, the parallels between our war game and Last Evolution are apparent. Wallace even gets a brief cameo, the tamer who appears in the film Hurricane Touchdown. As Kizuna was intended to close both the adventure series off and be a love letter to the fans who grew up with it, I admit it was great to see how the characters have aged. Seeing them navigate adulthood was charming, with my favorite moment being Joe working at his goal of becoming a doctor. The characters from O2 being fresh out of high school and having a partial role in this film was also great to see. Again, considering their treatment in Tri, which amounted to a lot of nothing, it was refreshing to see Daisuke, Ken, and the others on screen and aiding the main cast. And while it would have been great to see Imperial Dramon, just seeing the gang older and still kicking ass was great on its own. Kizuna's final battle between the main antagonist, Minoa, and the team of Taichi and Yamato was remarkable. Despite all of the issues the film has, which, again, we'll get into, this final battle was amazing. The animation dials up to 11 as the fight rages on. Eosmon's multiple forms were intense and intimidating, with Minoa's gradual mental decline being very engaging. Her reason for fighting due to her own trauma helped the battle have weight to it. Agumon and Gabumon's forms at the end were particularly stunning, although I have to admit it is very strange seeing Agumon with a man's face and not a dinosaur. Lastly, I have to sing my praises for Eosmon, as conceptually, it is amazing. The idea of an artificially created Digimon is something that has not been done often outside of Savers. The way it moved and attacked felt alien, with the erasure of any attacks directed at it being especially eerie. Eosmon pushed the heroes to the brink, self-replicating and ultimately fusing with the one who made them. The final form being my favorite of its evolutions, boasting a gorgeous color palette and that creepy humanoid mask. Unfortunately, this is about where my praise for Last Evolution ends. Everything I've just mentioned is genuinely great, but now it's time to get into everything that didn't work. The problems of Last Evolution begin to show directly after the first confrontation with Eosmon. Minoa divulges what will become the core conflict of the film. This being that all of the Chosen Children eventually lose their Digimon partners. The reason for this is that the Digivice operates off of the limitless potential of youth, and as you age, that potential begins to be reached. Once you've hit that mark, well, bye-bye Digimon. Taichi and Yamato are then left to confront their feelings on this, as well as uncover the mystery behind this new threat. The introduction of this concept from Minoa felt rushed, as there is a stark juxtaposition between the battle with Eosmon and the grave conversation the characters have. And while I understand that Kizuna is operating under the idea that this is meant to be sudden, it simply doesn't blend well with the story. Not to mention, it's all too convenient for the issue of losing their partner to crop up during this battle with a strange new foe. Of course, with any film, or Digimon property, suspension of belief has to be there, but this introduction just doesn't blend very well. If the film were to let this mystery linger, assuming the film were able to be longer than the standard anime film, then this major plot point could have slowly unraveled. Kizuna, however, is not interested in making for a fun time. This film operates on the notion of tragedy for the sake of tragedy. The core message of Last Evolution is that you need to grow up and let go of the past, to be able to face tragedy and accept it. While this message is fine on its own, and could have even worked for a send-off to a Digimon series, just look at the end of select series such as Tamers and Savers. The way it is handled here has a completely different tone. Kizuna follows Taichi and Yamato as they spend their final time with their partners, while the other Chosen Children are simply taken care of off-screen. Mimi, who is off living her best life, falls into a coma at the hands of Eosmon. Takeru and Hikari are both dealt with in a similar way, but with those two, at least it's used to pull Taichi and Yamato into the hands of Minoa. As for Joe and Sora? Absolutely no explanation on screen. I'm aware that there are some supplemental mini-episodes to help explain their statuses, but for a film that is meant to be a love letter to an entire series, I'd have liked it to be more interested in respecting its characters. Sure, they may not have been as important as Taichi and Yamato, but to do away with them off-screen to advance the plot is just terrible. There's no other word for it, really. It's a terrible way to handle your cast and the fans of these characters. And while Kizuna set the stage for the cast nicely, Taichi and Yamato still leave me with questions. They largely act in a way that is in line with their past iterations, being quick to spring into action and sharing goofy banter, but certain decisions did seem off, such as Taichi not inviting Agumon to his apartment even once. I find that hard to believe. I know life has gotten sporadic for him, but this is supposed to be his bonded partner, and he didn't make time for him even once? It just feels strangely out of character for me. Moving back to the main conflict of the film, the issue of time running out with your Digimon partner. It's a dysfunctional idea, not just with the film, but with the Digimon franchise as a whole. For starters, this is hardly even explored within the film itself outside of basic tragedy porn for our two central heroes and the main villain, who lost her partner when she was younger. Setting up the idea that if you follow your dreams, you'll lose your Digimon. Minoa lost Morphomon due to growing up too fast and advancing her life goals at a very young age. Okay, sure, but then why is it that the most functional members of the adventure cast haven't already lost their partners? Izumi, who is running a full-fledged business, and Joe, who is working his way through medical school, haven't been faced with this issue, but Taichi and Yamato are. The two who are listless and have no plans for their future. It could be argued that they have potential in them for whatever future career they may have. But of course, this may be asking a bit too much of Last Evolution, as it is too afraid or uninterested to show us much of anyone aside from Taichi and Yamato. But I digress. Moving along, the idea of there being a countdown until you lose your partner is the exact opposite of a message I would expect from Digimon. A series that builds its foundation on the idea that through the bond of human and Digimon, anything is possible. As I stated earlier in the video, while each Digimon entry is different, they tend to have themes that are inspiring. Kizuna being the direct opposite of this, as the main thesis is to grow up and move on. To rub extra salt in the wound, there are many different examples of Digimon series or games where there aren't just children with Digimon partners. Digimon Sabers has a multitude of older characters with partners, as well as more recent examples including Cyber Sleuth and Ghost Game. Disregarding all of this and operating under the idea that in the Digimon Adventure canon that this is how it must be, then it's still an extremely cruel message to send your fans off with. Let alone shoehorned, as the film even draws in the most reliable force when it comes to all things digital world by having Genai confirm this to Taichi. His explanation as for why they didn't know sooner is that telling the kids that this would happen would just be cruel. Which, I understand. You shouldn't tell kids that essentially their strongest bond in the world will be stolen from them. But it all just compounds this feeling of being shoddily thrown together just for tragedy's sake. I know this may be pedantic, but thinking about the other chosen children in the film who have yet to lose their partner bearing this knowledge, having to worry about the fateful day they'll lose their partner is upsetting. And not just the humans, but also the Digimon who have to just accept that, oh, my owners are done with me, guess I'll die. Adventure has always been weaker than the series that came after it in terms of how partner Digimon are handled. And what I mean by this is, as more series came out, the more personality and development the monsters would have alongside the humans. Agumon, Gabumon, and the others aren't exceptionally deep, but they still have their own quirks that make them stand out. But no care is placed on how they respond to this incoming fate. They just accept it and move on. Digimon as a series has always been about the partnership of Tamer and Digimon, and for one part of the dynamic to be portrayed with next to no concern of their fate is a bit off. Though I suppose it could be due to the fact that Kizuna doesn't even properly explain what happens to them, whether they're swooshed back to the digital world or if they outright die. According to the producers of the film, the ending of O2 is canon, the ending where all of the characters get married off, have children, and they're Digimon. And listen, I'm fine with a piece of media not explaining every minor detail. Dragon Ball is one of my all-time favorite series, and we all know that Toriyama made stuff up as he went. But for this to be the definitive ending to the adventure series, it'd be appropriate to take a second to explain what is going on, leaving the last time we see Agumon and Gabumon as a bittersweet but ambiguous goodbye. Outside of the core theme of reaching potential and accepting goodbyes, the main antagonist of the film, Manoa, also shifts perspectives in a jarring way. At first, she's introduced as someone with immense knowledge regarding the digital world and this impending threat. Then, she takes a backseat, leaving audiences to wonder about her. And then is finally brought to light as a villain with an admittedly solid motivation despite my gripes with the film. The mystery surrounding her feels as rushed as the sudden threat of losing your Digimon partner, as she goes from ally to foe. Again, suspension of belief is required for most movies, but I really do find it hard to believe that Izumi took as long as he did to unmask her. Taichi and Yamato are just average guys with average intelligence, but Izumi, the character who is running a successful business based on technology, couldn't have sniffed her out faster? On its own, this would have been a somewhat minor issue, but taking everything else into consideration, it just serves to make the foundation of this film a lot weaker. Jumping back to the main thesis statement being that potential is the reason that Digimon will leave, Kizuna seems to miss the mark on this as well. During the final battle with Taichi and Yamato against Eosmon, they accept their circumstances and understand that if they don't fight now, then all of their friends and other innocent lives will be lost, causing them to unlock a new evolution for their partners and delivering the final blow to the big bad. And maybe, just maybe it's me, but it could be argued that the two of them directly prove the concept that they've reached their potential wrong, as they literally unlocked a new evolution for their partners due to this strong bond. Regardless of whether their evolution was a final trump card or proof of potential though, the main conflict of the film is meant to be symbolic of age. A theme of somber reality that is intended to be positive, triumphing over tragic circumstances and finding the strength to move forward. Kizuna takes this idea but ultimately fumbles it by actively telling audiences to move past the very property it's intended to celebrate. Fans who tune into this film aren't going to want to just walk away from something that means so much to them. That's insulting. If the story were meant to send off Adventure alone, then the main struggle shouldn't have been the loss of their Digimon partners. For what it shows, adult fans of the series are in a way told to leave Digimon behind because they're too old for it. Which, for a film that is meant to be a love letter to both the fans and the series, the message, it sinks. Everything you love is going to die one day, and that sure sucks, but at least you can say you're a grown-up now. The same can be said for those watching this film as a kid, since they'll likely take away the message that growing up sucks, and then go on to feel anxiety and weird about their future. Before I get into this, I want to go out on a limb and state that I am of the firm belief that most people probably couldn't write a better story than ones we get. Oftentimes there will be people who will look at a movie, game, or whatever else and take it upon themselves to boldly declare how much better they would have written it. Which generally is untrue and a bit conceited. But with Last Evolution, I have to say that if the writers for this film made just a few minor tweaks, then it would have been a much stronger and concrete film. Were the writers to carry the notion that one day, your time with your Digimon partner will run dry, only to pull the carpet out and reveal that as long as the bonds you carry are strong enough and you have the will, then the partner will never have to leave. That'd make for a much more inspiring movie, as well as one that lives up to the standards that Digimon has set. There are a lot of comparisons from reviewers as well as fans to this film shares a lot in common with Toy Story 3. That is true. Both have the theme of growing up and letting go. But the core and crucial difference is the subject matter. Toy Story is about, well, toys. Simple action figures that as we grow older, we do tend to stop playing with. Digimon aren't toys. Even if the series began that way with virtual pets, it has evolved past that. As far back as the very series we're covering has shown, Digimon are complex beings. They're meant to be alive and as intelligent as humans. So while the execution and film are the same, it's hard to see the comparison as a victory for Last Evolution. And the final nail in the coffin for Kizuna is that the villain is ultimately proven right. No matter what Taichi and Yamato do, they lose their partners in the end, in spite of their final battle and newly found evolution. I know the takeaway is meant to be that the duo deal with their loss in a healthy manner, while Manoa took her grief too far. But her grief is more or less justifiable due to her circumstances. The new rules of adventure act as a cold gatekeeper for who gets to keep their partners and who does not, punishing the chosen children for growing up, whether that be preemptively or not. On the more positive side, Last Evolution is a film that is top to bottom gorgeously animated that has some excellent callbacks that fans will have fun pointing out. On the negative, it shoots for a message of maturity and accepting loss and misses the target by half a mile. It revels in fan service one moment only to completely miss the mark the next. A strange mishmash of ideas that, in the end, failed to leave any lasting impact. And if everything else I've said so far hasn't been bad enough, Last Evolution is about to be in an even more head-scratching spot. A conclusion film akin to it has been announced to finish off the story for Adventure's sequel, Digimon Adventure 02. Titled Digimon Adventure 02, The Beginning. This film is set to cover the origins of human and Digimon bonding by showcasing the first ever chosen child. Personally, I'm excited to see where this film goes, but how it will be affected by Kizuna, or rather how it affects Kizuna, is something that could be dodgy. Whether 02 The Beginning acknowledges the tragedy of Kizuna, or it doesn't, either will put the film in muddy waters. If it does acknowledge the outcome of Taichi and Yamato, and doesn't bring their partners back, then it upends the intended canon ending of the original series from 2000. On the other hand, if it hand-waves the events of Kizuna, then it boils that film down to being ultimately pointless, putting beloved heroes through heartache just for the sheer sake of it. Whatever happens, I'm going to remain hopeful that 02 The Beginning is a great film and finale for this long-running story. As for Last Evolution, I believe it serves as a good example of how not to end your series. I just want to say thank you to everyone that has made it to the end of this video. This has been a different type of video for sure, as I generally try to point out the good aspects of media that I've come across. However, Last Evolution really put me through it, being such a weird and cold ending for a series that I've loved for a long time. Thankfully, Digimon is a huge series with various different entries. If you guys like this video, then please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and press the bell button to be notified anytime I put a new video up. Thanks again for watching, and see you on the next one.